Aloha, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about archetypes. So if you have either no clue of what I'm talking about, like what the heck is an archetype, or you do have a clue what I'm talking about and this is an interesting subject to you, I hope you stay tuned and keep watching because I'm going to be diving into super general information, but also how I feel like learning about our archetypes and archetypal patterns is actually a critical tool to learn about as far as improving our self-discovery and especially for spiritual growth. So again, I hope you stay tuned and keep watching. All right, thank you so much for sticking around. So I'm laughing at myself because apparently I've already had a dress rehearsal, meaning I actually just sat down and recorded what I thought was going to be my video and realized after I got done recording I didn't have my mic on. So yay, dress rehearsal. So hopefully now I can actually just fly through this nice and seamlessly and smoothly. At least one can hope. Okay, so just to get right into it, like what the heck is an archetype? And what am I talking about? So I'm being a good teacher, and I'm actually looking up, or at least I think I'm being a good teacher, and I'm just looking up the definition according to Professor Google. So an archetype is a noun, but the definition is a very typical example of a certain person or thing. The example they gave is the book is a perfect archetype of the genre. So another definition is a recurrent symbol or motif in literature, art, or mythology. So that last little part is more of what I'll be focusing on here, is the reoccurring themes more as it relates to human created archetypes. So one example of an archetype that I hear commonly in my society of people saying like, oh, essentially like this archetype is bad as far as the people that are fulfilling the role of this archetype. The archetype is bad, we shouldn't have this. And that archetype is the politician. So the archetypes themselves, as far as what the general structure is of a, because these aren't just personality archetypes, they're actual like, so to try to not get into too woo-woo language, they're kind of like energy structures. And so like no one aspect of an archetype, as far as a human created archetype, can really cross into another archetype. Like, so for example, the politician archetype can't merge and cross over into, say, like the prostitute archetype. They just exist on their own dimensions. And so politician archetype is its own thing, as well as well, the example I use, the prostitute archetype, is its own thing, and they have their own unique set of attributes. So the politician, I just, generally speaking, usually hear people relating to the politician archetype as a negative. And so but wanting to just clarify that the archetypes don't, I think I was trying to actually just explain this and I got a little sidetracked, but they're not good or bad either in their own existence. They're neutral, but their attributes exist on a spectrum. And so the spectrum can take us into shadow attributes or light attributes or more divine attributes. And so with the politician, as a human who is stepping into that archetype, they can exist either as a shadow politician or a divine politician. We don't want shadow politicians because those are people that have weaseled their way into positions of power for self-serving. That's not a good politician. That's somebody that is basically violating the integrity of what the highest attributes of the politician archetype have to offer. So we being, society, we want to keep on the lookout for people that are claiming that they're this divine politician over here when they're really the shadow politician. And the way to tell that they're being a shadow politician is, are they basically only serving self? Because if you're a politician and you're genuine about that archetypal role, the main goal then is nothing to do with you, and you're being of service to your community or your country on, the larger scale. So that's just one example, real quick, of kind of like nutshelling what an archetype, if you're just looking at one, what it can look like as far as, in us humans, and that it can exist on the spectrum. So why am I even talking about any of this? Well, because I actually, as a transpersonal life coach, but also as a personal improvement, but also spiritual growth and development enthusiast, I think that the learning about ourselves on an archetypal level is actually really critical in just getting to understand ourselves and understanding the complexities of ourselves. And so anyhow, I just feel that learning about ourselves on an archetypal level is just a really important way to understand the selves, but also that it can actually be a tool. So one of the tools that I wanted to talk about is actually given in a book called Soul Contract, and I'll try to put it up over here. So the book Soul Contract is by a woman named Carolyn Mace, who is one of our modern day teachers into this whole subject matter. And she, as far as I understand it, was also a student of Jungian. Well, she was an actual psychologist and counselor, I believe, and one of her main fields in psychology was studying Jungian psychology. And Carl Jung is the main figurehead that even introduced this concept and term archetypes into our vernacular, but actually gave some scientific foundation for what the heck he is even talking about. But even Carl Jung himself, the way that I understand it, sort of wrapped up that work with, stating that, I'm paraphrasing, but in essence, us humans are complex flipping beings, and even as he was studying and looking at archetypes and archetypal patterns, it was just kind of like, is any of this making sense? And so it's kind of like there's also a knowing that a lot of this stuff can be somewhat abstract when we're looking at it and trying to understand these patterns. And so, getting into it as a tool is that, first, and it's kind of a general, I guess, rule of thumb. I don't think it's an actual official rule, but we'll just say it's a general rule. That if, we're really serious about our personal growth and especially our spiritual growth, that it's inevitable. You're going to have to get input from others, meaning people outside of you, because we're always going to be somewhat biased to how we're looking at ourselves. So if you're trying to learn about yourself and your archetypes, getting other people's input. So that book that I was referencing, the Soul Contract book, that's a great book. Yes, because it's actually teaching about this concept, and it's also teaching about mapping your actual soul blueprint, what Carolyn Mace refers to as your soul blueprint. But then also she has a whole index of like every major archetype that she could think of, and she does a really great job of going pretty deep, some more in depth than others, into describing like what the main essence is of that archetype. And then she also gives examples of where you can find characters. So whether you're going to like a story or watching a film, of ways that you can start to get more understanding of that archetype and the patterns that go with that archetype, so that you can better figure yourself out. So that's on the tool side, is using so all of the archetypal patterns that are out there, that are in existence, and starting to map out, again, I'm using Carolyn Mace's terminology, but mapping out your soul blueprint. And according to her work, and then me applying what I learned to myself, but then also, now working years with it and working with clients, I've found that work to definitely hold up. So really, most people have, as they, so the soul blueprint, that's all terminology based around the concept of reincarnation. So I guess first and foremost is you would have to be a person that's either open to or you do believe in reincarnation. So as you're mapping your soul blueprint, you're basically looking for 12 archetypes that, in the most simplistic way to put it, describe you. Describe how you would describe yourself just through archetypes, and what your general patterns are, the things that you tend to be attracted to. But two, learning these archetypes can give you a fuller understanding of, well, why am I attracted to, say, certain kinds of people, or just all kinds of stuff. So there's a whole just index of knowledge that can just be expanded just by understanding ourselves from this angle, from the archetypal angle. And then the other thing I wanted to add was that I also find, or I have been finding, the more that I look at like typology and typology attributes, or even Enneagram, because that's one of the other really more well-known and actually has some science behind it, personality model, is that there's overlaps with an archetypal blueprint. So it's another way to basically understand ourselves more deeply, which if you're somebody that's really, caring and just wanting to give your best efforts to personal growth and spiritual growth, I think this is going to be an important tool for you to tap into and begin to understand yourself from this angle. So again, there was that book, Soul Contracts that I mentioned, and I doubt I'll try to maybe leave like a link to something in like the description box, but if nothing else, I would have put something up here so that you can reference that book if you want to. And I do think it's a great book. but also that I think it is helpful to do that kind of work with somebody else. And then also on the professional side, to do that kind of work with a professional archetypal tarot reader. I'm sure you could probably Google that. And then, shameless plug, I do offer tarot readings for specifically for archetypes and reading your soul blueprint. So if anybody is interested, we can always set up a time and a meeting for that too. So essentially, I was hoping to try to cram all this in as short of a video as possible for today, for this week. And if there's any questions, maybe I missed something and it didn't explain it too well, please don't hesitate and leave those in the comments below. And yeah, so wanted to eventually come around to this subject just because, again, I do feel it is really important, especially for those that are on the, not like you're taking life seriously, but you're taking your personal growth and your spiritual growth like kind of seriously, like you're trucking away at it. So this is just a tool that I do think is incredibly advantageous in getting to understand yourself and then, you know, even other people. So anyhow, I hope it helps, and we'll catch you in next week's video. Aloha.